Let's talk about neurophysiology, classification, cells, and also cranial nerves. The nervous system is going to be divided into the central nervous system and the peripheral nervous system. Central nervous system simply refers to the brain and the spinal cord. Anything that comes out of the brain and out of the spinal cord is called the peripheral nervous system. Peripheral nervous system can be autonomic or somatic. If you think of autonomic, think of the word automatic. So the autonomic nervous system is involuntary. Okay, you don't control it. It just happens like that. And then the somatic nervous system is voluntary, meaning this is the portion that has to be controlled. For example, if I want to contract a muscle, I want to do it. So that is somatic. Autonomic nervous system, the one which is involuntary, can be sympathetic or parasympathetic. Sympathetic refers to the increase of energy consumption. It is also known as the fight or flight. So on the sympathetic, immediately I see a snake, I'll not control it that I should feel afraid. So that is to prepare me either to fight or to run. So that is why it is referred to as the fight or flight. And so it is connected to some other things such as adrenaline. And then the parasympathetic is the one which is involved when you are in a normal state or when you are digesting. Simply, there is no flight or flight, just a direct opposite. Right. So here again it is. We can see the central nervous system, brain, spinal cord. Peripheral, we have got the somatic, autonomic. Somatic, voluntary movement. For example, I want to move a muscle. Autonomic, this is involuntary. For example, of course, divided into sympathetic and parasympathetic. Parasympathetic, think of digesting when you are just resting, stomach is digesting. Sympathetic, think of preparing for a fight or a flight. Again, here it is, just adding on to the somatic that we have got the sensory and the motor. Sensory is the sense input. For you to be able to sense, that's why it is sensory. Okay. And then the motor is sense output. For you to be able to feel like that. Now let's talk about the cells of the immune system. Cells of the immune system are going to be divided into neurons and glial cells. The neuron, we are going to talk about it. The glial cells can be divided into the microglia and the macroglia. Micro, this is simply a tissue macrophage. So when these macrophages go to different points in the tissue, they are going to be known by different names. For example, if the macrophages go to the skin, they become the Langerhans cells. If they go to the central nervous system, I mean to the nervous system, they are going to be known as the macroglia cells. If they go to the liver, they are called as Kupffer cells. If they go to the lungs, Dust cells. They go to the bone, osteoclast. They go to connective tissue, histiocytes. They go to the kidney, mesenchymal cells, and so on and so forth. And then we have got the macroglia. Even from the word macro means big. So the macroglia is going to be divided into three. We have got the astrocytes. Astrocytes form the blood-brain barrier. We have got the oligodendrocytes, which are found specifically in the central nervous system. We have got the Schwann cells, which are found in the peripheral nervous system. So if we discuss a neuron can be marinated or not. So in the central nervous system, what is responsible for forming the myelin sheath is the oligodendrocytes, and then in the peripheral nervous system, what is responsible for forming the myelin sheath is the Schwann cells. Now the astrocytes can either be fibrous or protoplasmic. So here is again another thing just to show us the cells. Now here we are dividing them into being either in the central or being in the peripheral. So in the central nervous system, we have the astrocytes, we have got the epidermal cells, we have got the oligodendrocytes, and then the microglial cells. Can see also, take note of the shape of the astrocytes. In a case of a histology lab, if it came or just anatomy test, this can come for someone to be able to identify. So I've got the astrocytes, their function, they maintain blood-brain barrier, as we already mentioned. They control also the levels of neurotransmitters around synapses. Synapses are going to be discussed when you talk about the conduction of nervous impulses, and then regulate ions and provide metabolic support. The epidermal cells, these are going to line the spinal cord and ventricles of the brain. They are involved in producing cerebrospinal fluid. The oligodendrocytes, they myelinate the central nervous system axon. They also provide structural framework, as we already mentioned. The microglia, because these are simply macrophages in the tissue, meaning that they are involved in the immune system. They remove dead cells and pathogens by phagocytosis. If we go to the peripheral nervous system, satellite cells and swan cells. So the satellite cells, these are just cells which are going to be able to see surrounding the neurons like that in the peripheral nervous system. So these surround the cells, the cell bodies in ganglia. Okay, the cell bodies in the central nervous system like that. I mean in the peripheral nervous system. They are also going to regulate neurotransmitter levels. The swan cells, they get to myelinate the neurons in the peripheral nervous system. They also maintain and they are also involved in the maintenance and regulation of neurons like that. All right. So here are the glial cells. We have got, of course, we know that the glial cells can either be micro or macro. Okay. And then we have just mentioned to say the ones which are macro can also be, these are the bigger ones which can also be further redivided. Now, as we can see, this is a nerve. A nerve has got the cell body, which has got the nucleus and also the organelles, and then we have got the axon. The axon has got swan cells, as we're able to see here. And then we have got the oligodendrocytes. These are the ones which form these the swan cells. So the swan cells, we can see really connected to the oligodendrocytes. What's the difference? We said the formation of this marine sheath. Okay. The formation of the marine sheath when you're talking about the peripheral nervous system is going to be because of the, sorry, not the peripheral, but the central nervous system is because of the oligodendrocytes. And then the swan cells do form the same marine sheath, but in the peripheral. So simply the same thing. And then we have got the microglial cells. As you're able to see, they are much of smaller than the macroglial cells. All right. So now these are the astrocytes. We said the astrocytes can be divided, not this one. The astrocytes we said can be divided into protoplasmic astrocytes and also the other group of astrocytes. Now, of course, here we are not able to see how we are able to divide those, but just one thing to take note of is they can be fibrous or protoplasmic. The fibrous ones and the protoplasmic ones, they form the blood-brain barrier. Macroglial cells can be oligodendrocytes or swan cells. That is what we should be able to know. And also astrocytes themselves. This is basically the macroglia. All of these three here are macroglial cells. Right. So meaning oligodendrocytes, also here the swan cells. Apart from the macroglial, the astrocytes, all these are what? Macroglial cells, apart from the microglial cells. And then these epidermal cells are found in the central nervous system. Now let's talk about the cranial nerves. We have got 12 cranial nerves. Cranial simply means related to the brain or the head. So these are the nerves which come or emanate from the brain. We also have those which emanate from the spinal cord. There are 31 pairs. These are 12 pairs. And we need to know them by name, especially for the sake of the anatomy test that is able to come. So simply to know them, we can use different mnemonics to be able to know them. For example, we can use this one. Only one of the two athletes felt very good, victorious, and healthy. So each first letter represents something: olfactory, optic, oculomotor, trochlear, trigeminal, abducens, facial, vestibulocochlear, glossopharyngeal, vagus, accessory, and hypoglossal. We should be able to know them by name and where they do go or what do they perform. We can also use a different mnemonic, or once one takes the anatomy final, a good vacation sounds heavenly. Or once one takes the anatomy final, a good vacation sounds heavenly. The olfactory, optic, oculomotor, trochlear, trigeminal, abducens, facial, auditory, and then we have got the glossopharyngeal, we have got the vagus, and then we have got the accessory, and then we have got hypoglossal. Now, if we use this one, instead of just saying accessory, we are going to put spinal at the beginning so that it balances with the S. And then also for this one, auditory, we can see an A here there. So when we get to use this one, even for the accessory, we are able to see that we don't have the S at the beginning, talking about the spinal accessory. Now, what are their functions? We have got the olfactory, which is involved in smell, optic in vision. Olfactory, no, this has to do with the nose. Optic has to do with vision or light. Oculomotor, most eye movements. And then we have got the trochlea, moves eyes to left to look at the nose, let me say. And then trigeminal, these are face sensation and mastication. The abducin, just from the word abduct, away. So this also move the eyes now to the sides, okay, to the sides. And then I've got the facial, the one which controls the facial expressions and also taste. Vestibulocochlear is in hearing and balance. So for you to be able to know where you are in space like that. Glossopharyngeal, taste and gag reflex. Vagus, we have got a parasympathetic innervation. We've already talked about parasympathetic. And then we have got the accessory ones, shoulder shrunk. If I want to move my shoulders up, hypoglossal, we have got swallowing and speech. Now, as you're able to see, for the first three, we have the same letter. How do you know which one is supposed to be the first one? Because we need to know the number and also the name on that number. So if you see olfactory, we said it has to do with the nose. And we only have one nose, so that should remind us olfactory should be number one, involved in smell. And then optic has to do with the eyes. We have got two eyes. So that should tell us that optic should be number two, which is involved in vision. And then the third one, we can simply leave out the all that remains definitely should be the third one. And this one is involved in most eye movements. And if we can say more about it, it is used in moving of the eyes up and down and immediately. If I want to move my eyes up, I want to move them down, I want to move them inwards, because the ones which are responsible for moving the eyes outwards is the abducens, right? And then we have got the trochlea. Now we can see also we have got two T's. How do I know which T is supposed to come first? If I use the first mnemonic, which tells me to know which has got the T's. So the trochlea is involved in most eye moving eyes to be able to look at the nose. Trigeminal is for facial sensation and mastication. Simply, if I were someone, we can see both have got a TR, but something that we are just able to use is you can pick anything that is able to work for you. For me, I might say, okay, G comes first in the alphabet, and then O comes later in the alphabet. Since O comes later in the alphabet, it is going to come first in this case. So just like when you want to know the opposite for sine is cosec. It looks like cos. So someone might be mistaken to say the opposite for cos is cosec, but you just take the opposite. So same with here, O comes later in the alphabet than G. So the G which comes earlier, let's put it later, like that. and then we'll be able to differentiate which one comes first: trochlear, trigeminal. We have got the abducens, we already know their work. So the trigeminal is for face sensation. Imagine something has sat on my face for me to be able to sense that. Different from the facial one, which is there to control my facial expression. Vestibulocochlear, hearing. Glossopharyngeal, taste, and also for me to be able to move food down, right? For food to be able to move down, that is swallowing. Also, the same glossopharyngeal is responsible. That is the gag reflex. Vagus, this one we've said, of course, involved in the parasympathetic supply. Okay, and also we have got the gag reflex. That is like in the gut, in the lungs. This one also goes there. The accessory is going to allow me to be able to move the sternocleidomastoid and trapezium. I am able to lift or to rotate the sternocleidomastoid. This is a joint that allows me to rotate my head. The trapezium is the muscle that is going to allow me to lift my shoulders. So that is the accessory. And then we have got the hypoglossal, which is there for swallowing and speech. Simply tongue muscle, it goes to the tongue. So you can see we have got different, a lot of these, some of them which go to the eyes. So if we are able to see the nerve number 5, number 3, number 2, number 4, they all go to the eye. Simply 2, 3, 4, and we have got the fifth one. So all of these are going to be able to go to the eye. The first one goes to the nose. The trigeminal, which is the fifth one, actually I included fifth one. The fifth one is not here. Simply 2, 3, skip. Okay, you are going to skip 5. 2, 3, 4, 6. You skip 5. 2, 3, 4, 6. 2, 3, 4, 6. We skip 5. The 5 goes to, mostly we can be able to see, this is the trigeminal that is going to go to the face for sensation if I want to feel anything. And then the glossopharyngeal goes basically to the pharynx, also to the mouth there, according to the function which we've said, of course, for salivating and swallowing, and also sensing of taste. We can see the 11th one, the accessory, is going to these muscles here. Muscles which will allow me to rotate my head and also to be able to move my shoulders up. If we look at the 10th one, which is the vagus, basically going to most of the organs, and we've said vagus is responsible for the parasympathetic. We said parasympathetic is where you are in a state of rest, you are digesting and such. So we can think of that for the vagus. And then the vestibulocochlear goes to the ear. And then we have got now the seventh one, which is the facial nerve, which goes to the face. What does it do? Control my facial expression. So these are the cranial nerves. So let's just look at a neuron then. A neuron has got, as we said, the cell body, and it has got the axon here. The axon is the of this lot. The, the neuron can be sometimes myelinated or not myelinated. Now, to be myelinated doesn't mean that the Schwann cells are not there. The Schwann cells can be there, but something is not myelinated. Actually, the Schwann cells will always be there on the nerve, but that will not mean it will always be myelinated. Okay. So the beginning of the axon is called the axon hillock. This is where actually the conduction of the cell potential is going to start from. When we start now talking about the cell potential and the conduction of electrical impulses through these neurons. We've got the nucleus, cell body, the dendrites, nodes of Ranvier. These are just the spaces between here. And then we have got the terminal of the axon. So neurons have branched, has branches or processes which we call dendrocytes and axons, and then they've also granules inside which are called nasal granules. We need to know that these neurons, they do not have a centrosome. Because of that, they barely divide, if not to divide. So that is why when a neuron has been formed, it has been formed like that. Okay. They also contain and secrete neurotransmitters. We know these are the ones now which are going to be involved in the conduction of a nervous impulse. Now, how do we classify neurons? You can classify them based on their polarity as either being unipolar. Unipolar, you are simply considering where the cell body is. Only one thing is connected to the cell body, that is unipolar. And then two things connected to the cell body, it can either be the axons or the dendrites, that is bipolar. Now you can see this one, you only have one thing attached, but it looks like two. So this one is a pseudo unipolar. And then we have got a multipolar where you have got an axon and a lot of dendrites, that is the multipolar. Now you can also classify these neurons based on their function as either being a motor neuron, a sensory neuron, or an interneuron. A motor neuron is also called efferent because it goes away from the central nervous system to the peripheral nervous system. It will go to the organs, might go to muscles and such things. Sensory is also called as afferent because it goes towards the central nervous system. And generally, the sensory has got a short axon and long dendrocytes. And then the dendrites, the opposite is going to be true for the motor neuron. You can also classify neurons based on their length as either being the Golgi type 1 and the Golgi type 2. So Golgi type 1, these are large neurons within brain regions. Or the Golgi type 2, these are small local circuit neurons. So we're able to see here the Golgi type 2, which are the small local circuit neurons, and then the Golgi type 1, these are the large ones which are able to see there. Okay. So Golgi type 1 neurons have got a long axon cell body situated in central nervous system, and their axon is going to reach also to the remote peripheral organs. Or the Golgi type 2, because it's small, as we've said, they've got short axons which are just present in the cerebral cortex. This is basically of the brain and spinal cord. So this is it on this part of the nervous or the neurophysiology. We are going to continue with how nervous impulses are conducted in the next video.